Yeah. Chris Doering, SEC Network, Sirius XM. He finally figured out how time zones work, but we'll forgive him because we know where he went to college. We know the education that he got. Joins us now. CD, what's up, brother?
Dude, have you ever had more issues getting a guest on your show than what you've had with me the last 2 days? And, I'm being in the business like you two guys are. I mean, I know how frustrating it is when somebody commits to coming on. You have them booked in a time slot. They don't answer when they're supposed to. So I forgive you, or please forgive me. And I forgive you for blasting the University of Florida. You probably have the ability to deserve that at this point with all of my challenges coming on today and yesterday.
Okay, I'm just kidding. I know how good of a school it is.
I can't make any time zone accusations here because we once called Tyrann Mathieu 15 times during a Mike and Mike interview that he was doing, not realizing that Arizona didn't have daylight savings time. So it happens. Because we're good. We're good, dude. We're all good.
That's okay. We're just glad to have CD on. Hey, how are y'all handling the morning show? Of course, does SEC this morning, a show that when things get back to normal that CD and I do, on a regular basis there. Are y'all recording that show right now?
We are a little behind the scenes secret. Yes, we are recording it at this point because we don't have the ability to have anyone in the studio doing it live, which has created some new dynamics. We're using Zoom now, as everybody is. I mean, I wish I had some Zoom stock from about a month ago because everybody seems to utilize that. But, man, I mean, the great part about it, and shoot, I just heard T-Bob say that he probably shouldn't bring something up. I probably shouldn't bring this up, but we're doing an hour of radio and seemingly getting paid the same, so it's actually a win for me. I take 2 hours off my show and I'm still getting paid the same.
Hey, chill out. Cole Kubelik and I are doing the same thing in the afternoon, so chill out.
Nice work. Nice work all around.
Don't perk up Sirius XM bosses ears.
Charlotte, fire these bums. I'm right here. Okay? Watch CST. There we go. Sorry, just had to pitch myself there.
See, you're talking about SEC Network, the TV, though, T-Bob. We're talking about Sirius XM, where they're New York, D.C. Yeah, it's a completely different model.
All right, Sirius. You get the point. The point stands.
Okay, it's okay. Hey, Doering, so yesterday when you big-timed us, I wanted to have you on because we were talking SEC East, and we ended up having that conversation, but I think you're the perfect guest to have on because right now everyone just assumes that Georgia is the top of the class and that Jamie Newman's going to come in. He's going to be a quarterback that sets records in the SEC. And I do think Jamie Newman's a good quarterback. I've seen the tape. I've watched games at Wake Forest. But to assume that from day one, without spring now, that's just going to work out, and with all the other things that Georgia's done, right? New offensive coordinator, a special teams coordinator that's only been a strength coach, Sam Pittman now at Arkansas. I mean, we can go down the list of the moves they've made. I think Georgia – just personally, I think they're a good football team, but they've got a lot of work to do to get back to that point where they're just going to be in Atlanta representing the East.
I agree with you. And let's not even talk yet about the improvement that I think Florida's made. I mean, all of the things that you mentioned are very valid. And it actually reminds me a lot. I think I may have mentioned this to you before, Hess, but this idea that Jamie Newman's going to come in, he's going to be a world beater and tear up the SEC and SEC defenses after never having played a snap in this conference reminds me a lot of Kerry Blackshear Jr. and what people said about what he was going to do coming from Virginia Tech to Florida in basketball and how he was voted the SEC Player of the Year without even playing a minute in this conference before this season. And I think it's a little unfair, to be honest with you. I think it's naive on the part of the media members that believe that. Because there's an adjustment period. I think the athletes, as we all would probably agree, are much better in this conference than the defenses that have been faced in the ACC. And that's not taking anything away from Jamie Newman because I do think he's got great capabilities. But this idea he's going to come in and acclimate right off the bat, and that's with a normal schedule, not to mention this schedule with no spring practice and being away from the facilities. I just think it's going to be a challenge for him to come in. You mentioned Todd Monken, the new offensive coordinator. How quickly is everybody going to be able to acclimate to what he's trying to teach and the scheme that he's bringing to Athens? Sam Pittman is a huge loss, not only from the recruiting standpoint, but what he's done in terms of coaching up the offensive line. And T-Bob can speak to this way better than I can. That offensive line loses a lot from last year, and I think just from talent alone, it's going to be tough to replace. So I have serious concerns about their offense. The defense returns a lot of great players, and we know they've recruited extremely well the last couple of years. But to think that they are just going to be plugged back into Atlanta this year, given what they're dealing with, is a little naive and I think a little disrespectful to what's going on here in Gainesville.
Well, what's kind of wild is, and it's probably where it's even unfair to Jamie Newman, is I believe Georgia, is it 9 or 10 starters that they're replacing offensively? Like it's not just him, it's everybody.
Both
running
backs.
And as you said, there's no acclimation period, spring, summer, so like the expectations that's been thrust upon him are just kind of wild for multiple reasons. Here's something that sounded wild to me when I first heard it. The more I thought about it, okay. Chris, is Kyle Trask the best returning quarterback in the SEC?
I mean, who's it out of, right? It's out of either him or Kellen Mond.
Don't say Kellen Mond.
No.
We have forbidden that name.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm as frustrated with Kellen Mond as everybody else is. I mean, we were fed this line that he was going to be right there with Tua and heading into the season and Jake Fromm, and obviously Burrow ended up being better than all of them in my opinion this season. But I think that Kellen Mond left a little to be desired. He had a great group of wide receivers around him, talented tight end. Obviously, running back was an issue with the youth there after some injuries, and the offensive line certainly didn't help him out. But partly it's because of kind of what I believe are some limitations on his skill set, but partly the utilization of Kellen Mond, too, in that offense is a little frustrating. I think there's things that they can do to help him be more successful. But I'm a big Kyle Trask fan. I love the underdog in general. I love a guy that waits his turn to have an opportunity to play in this day and age, particularly at the quarterback position where everybody wants that instant gratification of having the opportunity to come in and play right now. This guy hung in there for years, seemingly with no real guarantee that he was ever going to get a chance to play. Everybody thought he was going to transfer to Central Michigan with Jim McElwain, but he stayed here, and he said the reason he stayed was because he wanted to be a Gator. And then when he got that opportunity, I truly believe Florida loses that night against Kentucky and Lexington if Kyle Trask doesn't come in. I mean, that offense was looking very stagnant. Kyle Trask came in, and what he does well, he knows what the defenses are doing. He can read it pre-snap, and he knows where to go with the football with accuracy. He holds it a little long at times, but I really believe that with the talent that he's going to have around him, it's kind of the opposite, T-Bob, of what Georgia's facing. Florida returns a ton of starters, particularly on the offense, and I think Kyle Trask has a chance to have a big year this year.
Really, when you look at last year's seeding, we're catching up with Chris Doering, SEC Network here on Hanging with Hester. When you look at last year, you mentioned it, Jake Fromm, Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Burrow, and you had expectations for Kellen Mond. Even
Felipe Franks was in that list too going into the year.
He was, some people had him ahead. We won't call names here, but you had established quarterbacks. Even if they weren't world beaters, you still had guys who had experience coming back. And now when you look at it, I can't remember a season where there's glaring holes as far as returning quarterbacks. I mean, Kentucky, they're going to get Wilson back, but he's been injured. Tennessee is a revolving door. We've talked about, Missouri had Kelly Bryant. He was that one-year stopgap. Helinski at South Carolina probably doesn't get talked about enough. I think you could probably argue
he had some nice moments.
He had some, especially from a freshman with a bad offensive line. So there's not that standout name. Ole Miss, it's like, okay, well, Corral's the passing quarterback. John Rice Plumlee's the running quarterback. I mean, how long can that last? And so I can't remember a year where you don't really feel confident to say, okay, this guy's the guy in the conference.
And what illustrates that even more is how different it was from last year. Remember, we talked a ton about going to Hoover last year for SEC Media Days and the fact that, 9 schools were being represented by quarterbacks that were there. I mean, it was really the storyline heading into the season. And some of those guys ended up panning out, and some of them probably had less than desirable seasons. But the ironic part about it, I don't know. I assume Felipe Franks is going to be eligible this year, right? I don't remember if he was a graduate transfer or got a waiver, but he might be
he'll be eligible. Yeah,
he might be the most experienced quarterback in the conference this year, right? And he's playing for a different team, but in terms of snaps that he's taken, he might be the most experienced guy out there. So it is a distinctly different situation than last year. But I think that's why and again, you can call me a homer here, but the fact that Florida returns so much, they have continuity on their coaching staff, they have a quarterback that returns, like dealing with this dynamic of not being able to be on campus and have these sessions, even if they're just player-led. Like, it's summer, it feels like summertime, but these guys can't even get together on their own. So I think the ones that are the most static from where they were last year and have the leadership and experience, those are the teams that are going to fare the best this year. And I truly believe that Kyle Trask is in that position because of all those dynamics mentioned. So, yeah, it is a really weird year heading into the season, not to mention the coronavirus stuff, but just the idea that we lose so much at maybe the most important position in football.
So there's one name that I think we kind of left out of your talking about quarterbacks, the SEC, and it's a name that had a lot of expectation, flashed at times. What do y'all think about Bo Nix? What y'all saw in year one out of Bo Nix? Like, where do you think the potential is there?
That's an interesting question because, again, I think a lot of it has to do with the supporting cast around him. Obviously, playing as a true freshman is not an ideal situation in any conference, but let alone the SEC. I think he took his lumps, and we all know that through adversity comes strength and perseverance and that experience that you need to be successful. I do think he's going to be a lot better. Now, I think he got away with some things last year. The touchdown pass against Oregon, everybody celebrates. That should have been an interception. I mean, let's be honest. The read was to throw the out. He throws the go route, and the safety, if he plays it like any capable safety in the world, it's intercepted, and they lose the ball game. But, again, sometimes, it's better to be lucky than good, and I think he would have learned from that experience either way. So I think Nix is going to be a good player. I wonder if he's going to have the jump that he would have had he had the ability to work through the spring and have the snaps during the offseason with his guys. But I do think that's an opportunity. Having the experience of starting last year, I think it's going to help him in the long run.
Another thing when you look at Bo Nix, who's calling plays, right? Chad Morris comes over from Arkansas, and when you've had a taste of being the head coach, then you become a coordinator, and then you might not have the full say-so in the offense, and you just keep going down the ladder. Ego's going to take over, and we know that Gus Malzahn likes to dabble. He likes to call plays, and every year it's like, okay, is he going to call him this year? Is he not going to call him? And so I think that dynamic and seeing how that plays out, that could speak to Bo Nix's growth more than anything.
No, I think you're right about that, and everything's good right now, right? I mean, we've heard Gus come on with us and tell us, how good of friends he and Chad are and how in sync they are in terms of what they want to do philosophically, but who knows what happens when the bullets start flying. And, I think it's a great luxury to have a guy with the experience that Chad Morris has on the staff. I just worry, you guys know, I played for a guy in Steve Spurrier who might have been the best play-calling head coach in the history of college football. And I couldn't imagine him giving that duty up. And then for a guy like Gus Malzahn who had that duty, then gave it up, only to take it back and really save his job there in Auburn last year, I just think it's hard to now pass that off again and allow somebody else to kind of hold your fate in their hands.
All right, he is Chris Doering, does a fantastic job for the SEC Network and SiriusXM. Absolutely my guy, and he's not part-time Peter Burns, who's joining us later. He not only does TV, radio, he's slanging mortgages as well, CD. I appreciate the time, but before we let you go, we've got a comment inside the Bayou Ford Huddle, wants to ask about the air ball you shot when you and your son were playing pickup basketball.
No, I think you guys, first of all, I love when you put something on social media and people, everybody's got a comment about it. So first I got accused of traveling, and they didn't see that extra dribble that I had. And then the air ball, it was actually a block. Now, I don't know if I'm more embarrassed to have shot an air ball or have my 16-year-old son block my shot personally.
He's got the youth on his side. It's fine.
You saw the hustle, though, bro.
I
hustled to the ball, and I threw it off of him to retain possession. That's really the thing that I'm trying to teach. I told everybody else, life lessons don't just occur in the classroom. Teaching takes place other places as well. And so I was able to teach some lessons on the basketball court.
He did not look like he was threatened by your jab step in the slightest.
Well, I don't know if that's because he's not threatened by my first step or he's just lazy defensively. I think it might be both.
Good spin.
All right, CD, man, miss being on the air with you. Hopefully we can get back sooner rather than later.
Hey, I agree, and it's great being on with both you guys simultaneously, man. Thanks for having me on today, guys.